4,500 years ago, while the rest of humanity was still living in scattered villages, a mysterious people built cities so advanced they would not be matched again for thousands of years. Their streets were laid out in perfect grids. Their homes had indoor toilets and running water. Their cities had covered sewers, public baths, and granaries large enough to feed tens of thousands. They traded with distant lands. They crafted exquisite jewelry. They built a civilization that stretched across an area larger than ancient Egypt and Mesopotamia combined. At its height, more than 5 million people may have lived under its influence. And then, it vanished. Its cities were abandoned. Its people scattered. Its very existence was forgotten so completely that for nearly 4,000 years, no one even knew it had ever existed. When archaeologists finally rediscovered it in the 1920s, they were stunned. Here was one of the greatest civilizations of the ancient world, hiding in plain sight, and history had no memory of it at all. This was the Indus Valley Civilization, a society so sophisticated that it had urban planning, standardized weights, and advanced sanitation, while most of the world was still learning to farm. Yet for all its brilliance, it left behind two haunting mysteries that puzzle scientists to this very day. The first, we still cannot read a single word of their writing. Their script has never been deciphered, and so the voices of an entire civilization remain completely silent. The second, and the greatest mystery of all, we still do not know what destroyed them. This is the complete history of the Indus Valley Civilization, the most advanced lost world of the ancient age, and the greatest unsolved mystery in human history. Our story does not begin in the ancient past. It begins in the 1800s, with a great railway being built across British India. The engineers needed crushed stone, called ballast, to lay beneath the tracks. And near a place called Harappa, in what is now Pakistan, they discovered a seemingly endless supply of perfectly made ancient bricks scattered across the dusty mounds of the countryside. No one knew where the bricks had come from. The local people had been quarrying them for years to build their own homes. To the railway workers, they were simply free building material. So the crews carried away hundreds of thousands of these ancient bricks and used them to lay the foundation for nearly 100 miles of railway track. They had no idea that they were tearing apart the remains of one of the greatest civilizations in human history. For decades, the strange bricks and the occasional carved stone seal that turned up at Harappa were treated as curiosities. A few scholars puzzled over them, but no one grasped their true significance. That changed in the 1920s. A team of archaeologists working under the British Survey of India finally began to excavate the mounds of Harappa and another site 300 miles away called Mohenjo Daro. What they uncovered astonished the entire world. These were not the ruins of simple villages. They were the remains of vast, sophisticated cities, carefully planned and brilliantly engineered, built more than 4,500 years ago. The discovery rewrote history overnight. Until that moment, scholars believed that the world's first great civilizations had arisen only in Egypt and Mesopotamia. Suddenly, there was a third, a civilization just as old, just as advanced, and in some ways even more remarkable than the others, that had been completely erased from human memory. They named it after the great river that gave it life, the Indus. As the archaeologists dug deeper, the scale of their discovery became clear. This was not just one or two cities. It was an enormous network of settlements, spread across a region stretching more than 500,000 square miles. It was, in terms of sheer area, the largest civilization of the entire ancient world. And yet, almost nothing was known about the people who built it. They had left behind no grand tombs filled with treasure like the pharaohs of Egypt, no towering temples to god-kings like the rulers of Mesopotamia, no carved monuments boasting of conquests and victories. Instead, they had left behind something far more practical and in many ways far more impressive. They had left behind their cities, and those cities were about to reveal a society so advanced, so orderly, and so mysterious that it would puzzle the greatest minds of the modern world for the next 100 years. To understand just how remarkable these people were, we must walk through their streets ourselves. Imagine walking into a city 4,500 years ago. You would expect mud, chaos, and filth. The ancient world was, by and large, a dirty and disorganized place. But the city before you is nothing like that. The streets are perfectly straight, laid out in a precise grid, crossing one another at neat right angles. The main avenues are wide enough for carts to pass, while smaller lanes branch off into quiet neighborhoods. This is Mohenjo-Daro, one of the two great capitals of the Indus civilization, home to perhaps 40,000 people at its peak. And it was built according to a plan. Unlike the tangled, winding streets of almost every other ancient city, Mohenjo-Daro was deliberately designed before it was built. Someone, or some group, had decided exactly where everything would go. This is one of the earliest examples of urban planning anywhere in human history. The city was divided into two main parts. To the west stood a raised platform, which archaeologists call the citadel, holding the most important public buildings. To the east lay the lower town, where most of the population lived and worked. At the heart of the citadel sat the most famous structure of the entire civilization, the Great Bath. It was a large, watertight pool, nearly 40 feet long, lined with beautifully fitted bricks and sealed with a layer of natural tar to keep the water in. Steps led down into it from either end. Around it stood rooms and corridors, and a sophisticated drain to empty and refill the water. No one knows exactly what it was used for, but most scholars believe it served some kind of ritual or religious purpose, a place of sacred cleansing. It is, quite possibly, the oldest public water tank in the world. But the true genius of these cities was hidden beneath the streets. The Indus people had built the most advanced sanitation system of the entire ancient world. Almost every house, even modest ones, had its own private bathing area and toilet. Wastewater flowed out of the homes through clay pipes into covered brick drains that ran beneath the streets. These drains were fitted with inspection holes so they could be cleaned and maintained. Dirty water was carried away from the city entirely. To put this in perspective, this level of plumbing would not be seen again in many parts of the world until the 19th century, more than 4,000 years later. The people of the Indus had clean running water and covered sewers at a time when the rest of humanity was still throwing its waste into the street. Their homes were just as impressive, built from standardized baked bricks, made in the exact same proportions across the entire civilization, hundreds of miles apart. Many homes had 2 stories, private courtyards, and wells for fresh water. This was not a city of kings and slaves. There were no enormous palaces and no tiny hovels. Most homes were of a similar, comfortable size, suggesting a society that was remarkably equal with a large and prosperous middle class. These were among the most livable cities of the entire ancient world, and the people who lived in them were about to build something even more extraordinary: a vast trading network that would stretch across the ancient world. The people of the Indus Valley were not isolated. They were master traders, connected to a network that stretched across thousands of miles. Their merchants carried goods by ox cart over land, and by sturdy wooden boats along the rivers and out into the open sea, sailing west toward Mesopotamia across the waters of the Arabian Sea. And we know this trade was real because of what they left behind. In the ancient cities of Mesopotamia, archaeologists have found Indus seals, Indus beads, and Indus pottery. The Mesopotamians even wrote of a distant, wealthy trading land they called Meluha, which many scholars believe was the Indus civilization itself. The Indus people exported cotton textiles, which they may have been the very first in the world to produce. They traded carnelian beads, polished and drilled with astonishing precision, along with timber, ivory, and gold. In return, they brought back silver, tin, and precious metals from faraway lands. To manage all this trade, they did something remarkable. They created a system of standardized weights, cut from stone, following a precise mathematical sequence. And these weights were used consistently across the entire civilization, from the greatest cities to the smallest villages. A merchant in one city could trust that a measure weighed exactly the same as it did hundreds of miles away. But these people were not only traders, they were brilliant artists. In their workshops, they produced beautiful pottery, painted with bold black designs on deep red clay. They shaped bronze and copper into tools, weapons, and breathtaking works of art. The most famous of all is a tiny bronze statue of a young dancing girl, standing confident and relaxed, a masterpiece sculpted 4,500 years ago. They also carved thousands of small seals from soapstone, each engraved with an animal and a line of symbols: a bull, an elephant, a tiger, and a strange unicorn-like creature appear again and again, pressed into soft clay to mark goods and property. And those symbols lead us to the greatest puzzle of all: their writing. They left behind thousands of inscriptions, short lines of script carved onto seals, pottery, and tablets. Scholars have studied them for over a century, using computers, statistics, and every technique imaginable. And yet, to this day, no one has ever read a single word. We do not know what language they spoke. We do not know their names, or the names of their cities, their kings, or their gods. An entire civilization of millions remains completely silent, speaking to us only through the objects they left behind. They built one of the greatest societies of the ancient world. And then, slowly, it all began to fall apart. By around 2600 BCE, the Indus civilization had entered its golden age. For the next 7 centuries, it would flourish as one of the most advanced societies on the face of the earth. The scale of it is almost difficult to comprehend. At its height, the civilization covered more than 300,000 square miles, stretching across what is now Pakistan and northwest India. It was larger than ancient Egypt and Mesopotamia combined. More than 1,000 settlements have been discovered, from tiny villages to mighty cities. And linking them all was a culture of astonishing uniformity. The same standardized bricks, the same weights and measures, the same style of pottery and seals. Across hundreds of miles, the people of the Indus shared a single, consistent way of life. It was a civilization bound together, not by an emperor, but by a shared set of ideas. And this leads us to perhaps the most remarkable thing about them. In all the ruins ever excavated, archaeologists have found no great palaces and no royal tombs. There are no giant statues of god-kings. There are no monuments boasting of conquest. There is no clear evidence of an army, of warfare, or even of weapons made for battle. Think about how strange that is. Every other great civilization of the ancient world glorified its rulers and its wars. The Egyptians built pyramids for their pharaohs. The Mesopotamians carved images of kings crushing their enemies. But the Indus people, for all their wealth and sophistication, left behind almost no trace of kings, armies, or violence at all. Some scholars believe this points to a society that was unusually peaceful and equal, a civilization that valued cleanliness, order, and trade over conquest and glory. If they are right, then the Indus may have built one of the most harmonious societies in all of human history. Of their inner lives, we have only tantalizing hints. They seem to have worshipped a mother goddess, symbol of fertility and life. One famous seal shows a horned figure seated in what looks like a yoga position, surrounded by animals. Some believe this may be an early form of a god still worshipped in the region today. Water, too, held deep meaning for them, seen in their great baths and their obsession with cleanliness. Many of these beliefs may have flowed down through the centuries, shaping the spiritual traditions of the Indian subcontinent that endure to this very day. For 700 years, this remarkable civilization thrived. Its cities hummed with life. Its boats crossed distant seas. Its people lived in comfort and peace that much of the world would not know again for thousands of years. It seemed unstoppable. But something was coming, something that no wealth, no planning, and no amount of ingenuity could withstand. And the great cities of the Indus were about to fall silent forever. Around the year 1900 BCE, the great Indus civilization began to die. It did not fall in a single dramatic moment. There was no famous battle, no burning capital, no conquering army at the gates. Instead, the collapse was slow, quiet, and mysterious. And it has puzzled archaeologists for nearly a century. The signs appeared gradually. The great cities began to empty. The brilliant drainage systems fell into disrepair. The standardized weights, the long-distance trade, slowly faded away, and the mysterious writing vanished entirely. One by one, the proud cities of the Indus were abandoned and left to crumble into the earth. The question that haunts us is simple. Why? For decades, the most popular theory was invasion. Many believed that waves of warriors swept down from the north and destroyed the cities by force. But modern archaeology found little evidence of war. And so, that idea has largely been abandoned. Today, scientists believe the truth lies not in human enemies, but in nature itself. The first clue is climate. Around 4,000 years ago, the entire region appears to have suffered a long and devastating drought, lasting perhaps 2 centuries. The monsoon rains weakened, crops failed, and the foundations of the civilization began to crack. But there may have been an even greater culprit: the rivers themselves. The Indus cities depended completely on their mighty rivers, and rivers, over time, can change their course. The evidence suggests that one of the great rivers slowly dried up. Others shifted their paths, flooding some cities and leaving others stranded without water. For a people whose entire world was built around these rivers, it was a catastrophe beyond anything they could fight. So they did the only thing they could. They left. Slowly, family by family, they abandoned their magnificent cities and migrated east and south toward the reliable waters of the Ganges Plains. They did not vanish from the earth. They simply scattered, carrying pieces of their culture with them, dissolving into the villages of a new age. And so, the greatest civilization of the ancient world faded from memory. Its cities turned to dust. Its language fell silent, and its very name was forgotten for nearly 4,000 years. The Indus people had built a society ahead of its time, peaceful, advanced, brilliant. But in the end, even they could not survive the slow turning of the earth itself. For nearly 4,000 years, the Indus civilization lay forgotten, buried beneath the dust, erased from human memory. Its cities mistaken for ordinary hills. But it was never truly gone, because the ideas it pioneered were simply too far ahead of their time to disappear completely. Think of what these people achieved. They built the world's first planned cities, when most of humanity still lived in scattered huts. They created indoor plumbing and covered sewers, thousands of years before such things would exist anywhere else. They built a society that may have been among the most peaceful and equal the world has ever known. No kings demanding worship, no armies marching to war, no slaves toiling beneath the whip, just clean, orderly, prosperous cities where ordinary people lived extraordinary lives, and their legacy did not die with their cities. When the Indus people scattered, they carried their culture with them into the villages and traditions of a new age. Their reverence for water, their sacred bathing, their mother goddess, and the horned figure seated in meditation. Many scholars believe these ancient beliefs flowed onward through the centuries, helping to shape the spiritual traditions of the Indian subcontinent that still thrive today, followed by more than 1 billion people. In a very real sense, the Indus never truly vanished. They live on, quietly, in the daily lives of 1/5 of all humanity. And yet, the greatest mystery remains. Somewhere, carved into thousands of tiny seals, their voices are still waiting, their language still unread, their names, their stories, their gods, locked away behind symbols no one alive can understand. Perhaps one day, someone will finally crack the code, and an entire lost world will speak to us once more. Until then, the Indus civilization remains what it has always been, the most advanced lost world of the ancient age, a society that mastered the art of living 4,500 years ago, and the greatest unsolved mystery in the story of humankind. If you enjoyed this journey into the past, please consider liking this video and subscribing to Aether Stories for more deep dives into the civilizations that shaped our world. Hit the notification bell so you never miss our next story. Thank you for watching. Until next time.